All right. Well, you got to appreciate the dedication. Joining us from the other side of the pond is the mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas. All right. What time is it over there, Mr. Mayor?
Good morning. It is 1:34 in the afternoon here in Frankfort. Good day. See a lot of Kansas Cityans and excited still to talk to everybody on KCMO this morning.
Well, yeah, those of us regular folks who are stuck back here, in the heartland. So let me ask you, we touched on it end of last week. You're over there. You're in Frankfurt. I gave you kind of a week to answer the question, but who's paying for the trip?
This is a trip that is underwritten by the Chamber of Commerce through the support of Bayer. Of course, you know Bayer, the German-based conglomerate. They have a good presence in Kansas City, both on the Missouri side and the Kansas side, a big plant in Kansas City, Missouri. Of course, they bought Monsanto. So also on this trip is the governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, Lieutenant Governor of Missouri, Mike Kehoe, as well as other figures, other folks. It really is a trade mission. In the earlier days, Sunday has football, but this is something that is covered by those investments, and we're proud that it is.
Okay, so Laura Kelly and Mike Kehoe are there with you. Is that right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, but not Mike Parson.
Governor Parson is not on this trip. Usually this is the sort of thing. He's usually a good Chiefs traveler, but I imagine he might have had other things to do of late, so I will miss him on this one. The Lieutenant Governor is here with Kansas City area business leaders and leaders from Missouri and Kansas, and we're proud that the Chamber helped put all of this together.
And Mike Kehoe, of course, has kind of been instrumental in a lot of those deals, including the World Cup coming to Kansas City in a couple of years, so I guess that does make sense from that perspective. All right, well, meantime, as you're getting set to travel yesterday, I know you followed some of the drama here where local news had it. I think we had it first where a CEO says that he's leaving downtown, Greg Trees, and he says it's because of just some of the homelessness, some of the trouble his employees have run into, catalytic converters being stolen. We read your response from the office just before we came on and had this conversation. But what would you say to any business owner who is, potentially dealing with some of these troubles and having these issues right now?
I noted a few things in my statement. First of all, and as you probably know about me, I have lived or worked near downtown for a good chunk of my life, so it's something that I've experienced. And before some of your callers say, but he has security now, long before that, when I was just a guy who was living at 18th and Vine. So, some of what he discusses, I have not experienced, but that is not to minimize the conversation. We know that car thefts have been up, driven largely by the Kia boys and that sort of work that they've been involved in. I know KCPD is working quickly to address it. As I noted in my note in response to the local press yesterday, we are trying to address the homeless problem as much as we can. The challenge of homelessness, though, is one being homeless, one exhibiting homelessness in and of itself is not a crime. So for us, it's how do you compel people to try to avail themselves of the opportunities that the city provides. And so I respect anyone's viewpoints. I would love for him to come to a Board of Police Commissioners meeting because, as you know, it is really not just a City Hall answer or response. There are things that I think the board and I can work on. I'm a member of that board. The others appointed by Governor Parson. And I think that that's going to be an important way that we try to make some change in these problems long term. I also noted in my letter, downtown continues to be one of the fastest growing areas of Kansas City, basically downtown in the Northland, where we're getting the most population increase. Businesses are moving there all the time. So I don't know if that's a universal viewpoint, but I want every customer to be happy. And so I hope to have the chance to meet with Mr. Trees along the way to see what specific ideas we may want to work on together to address these solutions long term.
What do you, when you look at, the way the world has changed the last 3 years, with more businesses doing some kind of hybrid model, work from home, not as many people going to a traditional downtown setting where you had a lot of office space. What does that look like? What do those challenges look like for Kansas City with some of the things that Mr. Trees brought up on top of the fact that, that office space downtown in any major city, but I would include Kansas City in that, probably is not as desirable as it was 3 years ago?
A few different things. First, there is a new reality to work, but, sometimes I take knocks for it, Pete, but as you know, I've been to a lot of different downtowns around the country over the last year, 2 years, 3 years. I think it is fair to say that Kansas City is recovering as well, if not better than almost any of them. right? I was on the streets of downtown San Francisco not long ago where, frankly, there was somebody who kind of came up and, if not heckled, certainly made it for an awkward situation for myself, my chief of staff, who was a young woman who was walking with me. I mean, these are the sorts of things that you're seeing, challenges in some areas. I think Kansas City is a better position. I think in many ways our downtown council, a collective of businesses that are saying, how do we make sure that there is a presence of folks, those folks who wear the yellow polo shirts on the streets, how are they intervening? How are they making sure they're addressing challenges long term? But I continue to be bullish about the future of downtown office real estate. People want signature addresses. People want to be able to share and sell Kansas City business. And unlike a lot of cities, I don't think you have broad-based fear of downtown Kansas City. Every T-Mobile Center show that I often hear about, there was a gospel concert on Sunday night, mainly a group of largely older folks who were there, who were enjoying it. I think you see people coming day, night, continuing to invest, and we're just going to make sure we can do all that we can to make sure every person is as safe as possible in our city, just like every other American city faces. But I think, frankly, we're doing better than a whole heck of a lot of them.
What about the homeless issue that you note here in the article? You can't simply round them up, move them out of the city. There are some on the progressive political side that say this is why we need, free houses for everybody or something like that. That's certainly not realistic. But you've seen this boom in homelessness. There's no doubt about it. And it's included downtown. So I know there's a lot of things that have happened the last couple of years that have led to that. But what can you do in the short term to clean that up?
The reason I always like being on your show is that at least for a few minutes I get to talk nuance in a way that I don't often get to, either on social media and certainly what I don't see on cable news from either side. I think you are absolutely right that there have been challenges over recent years, COVID-19 policies and beyond, that have helped exacerbate the homelessness problem. There are probably two things that I think are rather important. Step one, the homelessness problem often is a mental health and substance abuse problem. You need to continue to create pathways to treatment. You also need an enforcement solution in connection with it, which you cannot simply do because there are a lot of folks, and you know this, and anybody who's real about it knows this. There are a lot of people who experience homelessness. I experienced homelessness growing up that, either their folks or whatever are tough, down on their luck. That is a big group. But a lot of the people that I think this letter writer we're talking about are folks who often have been presented services and are saying no. Where there are offenses that allow us to get them into a system of either choosing incarceration or choosing some level of support, I think it's important for us to try to direct them in that path. I think that's something, particularly as we look at a new rehabilitation center, incarceration facility and beyond, you'll be able to do in Kansas City. I think that is something that's important and will help us say that it's not just going to be kind of a free-for-all in the ways that perhaps you saw, particularly in late 2020.
All right. Well, Mayor Lucas, I know you're a busy guy there in Frankfurt, but before we let you go, I've got to ask you about the letter to potentially annex Loch Lloyd, as some have noted, where you are offering to basically give Cass County, as I understand it, some acreage there by the proposed landfill site in South KC, and then Kansas City would theoretically annex Loch Lloyd. Some called it trying to trade Patrick Mahomes for Gardner Minshew. Is that a fair trade analogy?
I don't know if that's a fair trade analogy. Here's the generality. I've had conversations with people who are interested in the future of what happens with land in southeast Kansas City near the proposed landfill. What I've shared with them in the past is that I, particularly as a guy who grew up, I went to school in South Kansas City. I care a lot about that area of Kansas City. Has said I want to make sure that we have long-term economic development opportunity in far South Kansas City, whether southwest or southeast, i.e. near Raymore or near Loch Lloyd. In connection with Loch Lloyd, we have spent a decent amount of time talking about infrastructure investments. Kansas City invested in a Kenneth Road bridge repair, which really helps residents of Loch Lloyd and Johnson County. There aren't that many Kansas Cityans there. There's currently a multi-million-dollar request for repair of Kenneth Road near Loch Lloyd as well. I thought it was an opportunity to say, how can we actually look at a best future for that area of Kansas City, and also look to what Kansas City's long-term South Kansas City policy is going to be. I think it's great to live in Kansas City. So while some have felt like this might be some sort of challenge or threat, I love living in KC. A lot of other people do. I know you once did as well. And so we hope we can have fruitful conversations. I've seen the response back so far has been that there's not an interest. But, of course, if ever there was an annexation or de-annexation conversation with either community, there's always a discussion about what the public has to say. I just wanted to make sure people knew Kansas City was interested in a broad-based conversation in connection with it.
I thought it was interesting in that letter, though, you noted that if that were to happen, you might be open to some I don't know if tax breaks is the right word, but maybe absolving or not including Loch Lloyd in some of the Kansas City taxes. That was, I don't know, I just thought it was telling because to me that's kind of you admitting that, hey, a lot of people don't like taxes, despite the fact that, we're often convinced that people love paying taxes, like the earnings tax. I don't know. That was an interesting line, I thought.
Well, taxes are always an interesting discussion. I of course, stand by the taxes that we have, although I always evaluate where we can cut. For me, what was important was to say, if there is someone who has already made some plan for what their tax treatment will be, and that is a basis in which they're living in said community, then perhaps changing it midstream at short notice is difficult. I don't think we would ever look to throw out the entire Kansas City tax scheme, but I understand where there may be space for that conversation. I think this is the starting point for good conversation, and I think to the extent people talk to me about Kansas City infrastructure improvements in certain areas, sometimes that are outside or close to areas outside of Kansas City, if they're talking about Kansas City water and beyond, I think it's worthwhile to have this chat. So I look forward to having it with anybody who would like to.
Well, thank you for checking in here from Frankfurt. We appreciate the time, and we will talk to you next week. Safe travels back after the game.
Our longest call ever. I enjoyed it. Go Chiefs. And I'll give you a full debrief on all that we accomplished from this trip when we talk next Thursday.
All right. We will look forward to that. There you go. The mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas on KCMO.